Welcome to the Success Journey Show. Let's travel together through the lives of individuals on the road to success.
Hey, what's going on, travelers? It is Ricky Venters and Marlon Maddock, and we're back with you again for another episode of the Success Journey Show. Marlon, what's going on, bro? How you doing today, man?
Boy, I'm enjoying life. I'm enjoying life. You know how it is, man. Some people don't even get to wake up in the morning, so I can't complain. I know everybody cries about the Monday blues, but nah, I didn't have it today.
It's funny that you said that, man. We talk often, so we're on the same wavelength. I'm not surprised when you say something that I've been thinking or doing. So this morning, I'm in the car with my kids, and man, I just start blasting the music, man. I just start blasting. They're looking at me like, what in the world is wrong with this guy? I'm like, come on, guys, wake up. Come on, it's Monday. Go ahead, scream. They're looking at me like, I'm like, no, man, let it out. You know, I don't know if anyone ever heard of, what is his name? Tony Robbins. He does this thing called priming, right? So you just start get everyone in his audience just screaming super loud to get an energetic charge. So I was just messing around with my boys this morning to getting them going. I said, hey, guys, man, you want to start a good week, man, you got to start it off with energy. So like you, man, blessed to be here another week, blessed to be here another day, and just really excited to bring this episode to our travelers across the world. We have a phenomenal guest with us today. I'm really excited for her to share her story with us. And we're going to jump right into it. Today, we bring you none other than India Thusi. Did I pronounce your last name right, India? I want to make sure I got it.
Did a great job. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's such an honor having you with us on the Success Journey Show. Why don't you start off by just sharing with our travelers just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to get to know you and your audience as well. I'm India Thusi, and I'm a professor of law at Youre School of Law at Indiana University, Bloomington. I'm also a senior scientist at the Kinsey Institute for Sex Research. And so I teach criminal procedure, criminal law, regulation of vice, and critical race theory. And so my research and teaching really focus on the ways that race, sex, gender, and sexuality are policed and regulated in society. And so, you know, it's a very timely topic, especially in this moment and all the different issues we're dealing with, whether with policing or we're dealing with the regulation of women's bodies and sexual autonomy. These are the things that I focus on a day-to-day.
Oh, man. You just stay in the deep end. I mean, those are all just deep topics. I mean, just heavy topics. And, you know, you don't get no breather at all. You go from one to the next. No, I love it, man. It's going to be really exciting just diving into really just one thing I really want to know starting off is, you know, who is India behind, you know, the lawyer, right? What drove you into this passion of law and practicing law?
Yeah, you know, it's such an interesting thing because I said when I was 8 years old that I wanted to be a lawyer, and I had absolutely no idea what a lawyer did. I can't tell you why I wanted to be a lawyer. I had no real sense of it, but I felt determined that it was something I wanted to be. And I'm really not sure why.
You were on the playground arguing with everybody, huh, all the time.
No, I actually did not like to argue. Like one of my uncles asked me, they were like, do you like to argue? I was like, no, I don't like to argue. Why would I like to argue? but maybe I think it is that, you know, I was maybe passionate about representing people who couldn't be represented, or fairness, and just these ideas around justice and just ensuring like the right thing gets done. I think that might have been something that, it's definitely something I've always been interested in as an adult, even as a young adult. And so, even in high school, I did the law magnet program that my public high school had, and interned for the courthouse in Yonkers, New York, and did these different things. But I think as I got older, it was clear to me that I was really passionate about like civil rights and some of the harms I was seeing with the criminal system. So I grew up in New York. And when I grew up at that time, I think the people were really concerned about like the Rockefeller drug laws. And there was, we were, I guess, at the like height of mass incarceration and the war on drugs, and, where, young Black men were just treated as being criminals or like super predators and that sort of thing. Yep. And like, it was so bad that like, when I went into high school, there was a real like sense and acknowledgement that a lot of the people who started with us our freshman year would not be with us our senior year. Like a lot of let me be particular, Black boys who were with us, right? Because they would be incarcerated, arrested. And a lot of it was for like marijuana offenses. It was like these little drug offenses. Now I know how little they were, right? But these drug offenses that people would just end up being incarcerated for. And I think even then I had a sense of like, this isn't right, or this is something that I want to address. And I think at one point I wanted to be like a criminal defense lawyer, but I ended up becoming like a civil rights lawyer and thinking about like the policy issues and how do we change this. And after I graduated from law school, I went to the American Civil Liberties Union and worked at the racial justice program, really thinking about, how do we dismantle these systems, looking at like the school to prison pipeline, and like really breaking down this pipeline of, young Black kids into the criminal system.
The one that before you go, Marlon, one thing I got to say, it feels good when you start talking to someone and it's like you hear them speak and you start feeling that comfort, like a home type feeling, like, man, I recognize that, that accent, that voice. So I'm from New York as well, either a little further upstate than where you're from. But it was like, oh man, I picked up on that. Yeah, and we were around the same time, the whole war, the DARE t-shirts, everyone had a DARE t-shirt. Just say no commercials and all that type of stuff. So no, definitely feel where you're coming from. Go ahead, Marlon.
No, I said, how I knew this conversation was going to be other than going through your bio and stuff and saw the topics. And I was like, woo, just like we said, deep end topics. But I like the fact that you came on and you didn't put that DR before your name. Because a lot of people get caught up in the title. And so the title kind of, put a haze over their eyes versus what they're there to really do. You know what I'm saying? So I knew this conversation was going to be great because I could sense we're going to talk to somebody that's down to earth and somebody that's going to just hit on the topics that you really want to bring to fruition. Now I know you went to school a little bit above my mom's house over there in Fordham off the Grand Concourse, right? So yeah. That's my mom. She still live in the Bronx. She ain't leaving. South Bronx. She ain't never leaving the boogie down. Never leaving it. But when you were in high school and you decided that, hey, I really want to pursue this law thing, how was the monetary or the money? How did you figure out, okay, this is what I have to pay for school? Was your parents well off? Did they have the money to, what kind of household were you coming from? Did you just know like, hey, I could just go and I'll just accept that? Because a lot of times that's some of the block that happens to us when it comes to those higher education.
Yeah, for me with school, like on the one hand, even in high school, I'd like to have a good time, but at the same time, I was a bit of a nerd. Like, So the way that I kind of planned my school career was that I just thought I'm going to just get scholarships because I couldn't rely on my parents, which actually wasn't true because my parents ended up being really supportive and helpful to me. But that's kind of like my mindset going in. And so when I was in high school, I was just trying to do things to like, I was doing different like scholarship applications. I was doing different like writing competitions, and then I was applying to schools that would give me, a full scholarship. And so that was kind of where my mind was at. Like, I need to just do this on my own. And I didn't actually end up needing to do it on my own. My parents helped me, but I also had like a lot of, I got a lot of support from schools and from like external scholarships going through college. And then for law school, I worked actually throughout law school, which is not what people typically do. People don't work in law school. People usually just like go to the highest ranked school that they can, and then they take a bunch of loans and they don't think about necessarily the finances. But for me, finances actually were like a huge consideration. And so, during law school, I was a substitute teacher, I think throughout law school. I was also working at like a doctor's office part-time. I think there might even been like a third thing I was doing too, but I didn't want to go into like
I said you got a little Jamaican in you. Some people, that's a joke. It's a running joke we have on our podcast. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I had the ethic, I had the work ethic, and then like what's interesting about law school, if you do pretty well your first year, your second and third year, you can have this opportunity to work for these like big fancy law firms. And, during the summers, they pay you like an obscene amount of money. And so that can actually offset like a substantial amount of the cost. And so I did that too, even though I didn't end up going there after law school. But I did that to, make some money while I was in law school and to kind of like offset the costs. And then like within a year after graduating, I was able to actually pay off whatever debt I had outstanding because I was working throughout, I kept a tight budget. And then I also, the year afterward, I was able to like kind of clean up whatever was left. And so, it worked out pretty well for me because I was being disciplined about it. I was, for me, like for some people, they're more comfortable with having like a little higher amount of debt and then maybe take a little bit more time. For me, I was a little bit less comfortable with that. And then also, the thing that did for me was it freed me to do whatever type of work I wanted to do, as opposed to, doing something that I need to do because I had to pay down loans, right? And so that was really freeing and allowed me to like get experiences that are a little bit unusual, but also led me to like the path that I'm on gives me like a skill set that's like really unique. And so, I worked at the ACLU after law school. I worked for, a couple like really legendary Black judges, one for the federal court in New York, another one who was in like the appellate court, the federal appellate court. So that's the level right below the Supreme Court out in Detroit. And so I got this, these mentors and friends who, I had, early on in my career. And then, afterward, I decided I wanted to go to South Africa for some years and do research and, do other things. And I had the freedom to do that because I wasn't saddled with that, amount of debt that a lot of people are saddled with. And I did that and learned about like human rights and policing and learned, unique method, tools that a lot of lawyers don't have, and brought that back and came back here. And so, now I'm working as a professor. And so, I'm at a place where, I'm, obviously pretty settled and, I have tenure already, even though I was only a professor for like, 4 years. I got tenure, one of the shortest time periods for my law school. And it's largely because I was able to do these have these unique experiences and do these, interesting things that brought, human rights, policing, race, gender all together and like analyze them with a fresh kind of perspective.
Wow. So the undertone that I'm hearing in a lot of this is, man, you're a beast. Like like some of the opportunity, for one, having the mindset, for one, to have that financial consideration when majority of the people are not even thinking that. It's like, hey, just get through, you pay for it on the back end, right? Just go to school right now. Just having that wherewithal of saying, and that sensitivity of, hey, I don't want I want to have any financial constraints. So if it takes a little longer, okay. If I have to work a little harder, okay, I'm going to do it because I don't want to be in bondage in there. And then like you talked about, that it opened you up to have that freedom now to choose. Like now I have choices. Now I have options and I can go different directions. And you saw how the results of you going different direction gave you more opportunities now where you currently are, because you've had those exposures, because you set yourself up differently from the beginning. The undertone I'm hearing about in all this, though, is that when you show up, right? Even though you've had those experience in South Africa, getting tenure in 4 years, it doesn't just happen because you had experience of it. You had to come out and you prove that you had experience. You don't get these, opportunities at these huge law firms just because you applied, because you were in law school. Everyone didn't get those opportunities. You had to put in something, they had to see something unique about you in order to get those opportunities. And what I really want to pull out in this conversation is just that underlying India, like what gives you that work ethic? Like where did you get in that drive from to be able to push and kind of set yourself apart from other peers, and then just kind of pursue that greatness that you've been pursuing in your life?
Yeah, I feel like I'm not even where I need to be. Like, I'm not even there yet. Like, I know there's something for me. Like, I know there's something great for me that I'm supposed to be doing on this earth. Mm-hmm. I'm like on the path to what that something is. And so, I just feel like I'm working toward that and keep going, and like, it will materialize really soon. Like, there's been a lot of great things that have happened already, but I know that they're like laying the foundation for like something really important that I need to do. And so, having that sense of purpose, just knowing that, you're here to do something great in this world, and, just kind of working toward that, I think has been pretty critical for me. And then, there's also that saying, right? Like, if you just stay ready, so, you just stay ready, like doing and grinding what you need to do, then you don't have to get ready, right? And so when those opportunities come for you, you're already there, like you're ready to go, And so I feel like I've kind of had that mindset, like, doing what I need to do in each different level, even if other people don't think I'm going to be able to do it or not already expecting me to do it, and then just exceeding, whatever the expectations may be. It's been obviously a good thing for me.
Yeah. So for me, I had something in my head because you said New York. I don't know if you were around or you remember the W.E.B case.
Mm-hmm. I remember
it. Yeah. That case right there, boy, that was, anyway, that was crazy. Ricky, I don't know if you remember the Haitian guy, they locked him up in the precinct, and then in the precinct, they end up pushing a plunger up his rectum. And it was a big case in down the city. And also around the same time, they had this shooting in the Bronx where they shot that kid on his stoop like 45 times or something like that. It was New York was a crazy time. But I really want to ask about Johannesburg, right? Because, Mandela, all the stuff that was down there that was going on. When you went there, what kind of feeling did you have? And how was the law or what you were doing down there, the research that you're doing down there, how does it differ from the United States?
Yeah, what drew me to South Africa was that, in the US at the time, the Supreme Court had indicated that it was less willing to like embrace human rights domestically. And, South Africa was just the opposite. There, after the end of apartheid, they stated that they were going to have this human rights regime. And like their constitution is a really progressive constitution that, guarantees like the right to education, right to healthcare. And it's like this document that explicitly recognizes, human rights. And so I wanted to see what it would be like, to be in this, country where there's all this, commitment to human rights and respecting people's rights. How does that operate within a country's legal system? And so I went to South Africa. And when I first went there, there was a real sense of, I guess, for me, like excitement. Johannesburg, where I was in particular, is a pretty young city. In terms of like the demographics, like people are younger than they are in the States. And so there's just so much energy and like so much possibility. There are a lot of creatives there, a lot of, artists, a lot of academics, a lot of just like interesting people. And so, given like the legal system and just like the energy of the city, I was just really excited to go there and just like explore a little bit more. And I found that, there was this sense that, of so much possibility when I went to Johannesburg, and that, this would be very different than, what they had experienced during apartheid, and it would be like a new kind of order. At the same time, I saw some of the connections with the US, interestingly enough, like the fact that they had this long history of racial apartheid was actually something that connected it with the US. And it showed even when you have this embrace of human rights and say that we're going to completely change things around, that in fact, that history, that lingers, right? It's not enough to even embrace these norms, that in fact, even a police department that has a human rights manual can still engage in the same racialized violence that a police department here in the US does. And so I also saw those connections too, which was, really interesting and not something I was necessarily expecting. And, just the ways that, in both countries, like racial classifications mean a lot. Like there are parts of Africa where people don't have a sense of, them being Black, right? Because, that's just the norm. Like there isn't this differentiation, like I'm Black and you're, this or colored or whatever. Whereas in South Africa, part of the way that apartheid operated was making people very sensitive to that. People really sensitive to like differences in skin color and colorism. And, that's part of the reason why in South Africa, I believe that, you have xenophobia, which is motivated by the sense that, darker skinned, African people are from other African countries, not from South Africa. And then people will target, darker skinned people, right? And so, some of these, like this emphasis on race is something else that you really see in South Africa as well. And so, it just really illustrates like the challenges of completely, changing, a legal system and creating a truly equitable society.
Man, I'm tough. Woo.
And a deep end, man.
Yeah. That's deep in there. I'm just trying to. It's funny because, a lot of times when people think about slavery or even Jim Crow and all the human rights that we went through over here, they feel like it's 400 years ago. Nah. Dr. Martin Luther King only died the other day, man. You know what I'm saying? So Malcolm X only died the other day. It's very, we think we're far removed, and sometimes they're asking a community, the Black community, to do something that another civilization has taken years to do. They want us to do it in less than 70 years, less than 40 years, less than 50 years. And then it poses a problem because we even ourselves start to think that way, that we're behind the ball. We need to get, and so we start to try to, and then we're in that fight or flight mode versus perfecting our craft. And I don't know if you saw that. I know you said you saw the similarities, but I don't know if you saw some of those similarities down there with that.
Yeah, I saw some of that. The ways that like a legacy and a history of being told that, you're less than can impact multiple generations, right? So like in the context of the US, where you have, the history of racial integration is relatively recent, as you mentioned, right? Like there are people, I think there was someone, who was alive who, I'm not sure if it was their grandparent or their parent. I think it might've been their grandparent who was a slave, who's alive, right? Yeah. Like that's how close we are to the history of slavery. Like that's how close we are, We're just talking about a couple of generations, like people's relatives who were living. The judge I worked for, his grandparents were slaves, right? And so we're talking about something that's not that far removed, right? Because people we know now who have inherited property from their grandparents, right? Yeah. And so if you're from a family where like maybe your grandparent or your great grandparent was a slave, and then someone else is from a family where they might have owned, a little bit of property, they're starting from a substantially higher position right off the bat, just by virtue of their race and birth, right? Mm-hmm. So we have these deep inequities, and then when you pile on just like the mental implications of that, like of racial trauma, of not seeing people like you succeed to the same extent, right? And then in your own family, like people still being burdened by some of that history. It's just a huge kind of barrier that you have to overcome. And it's not to suggest that people aren't able to overcome it, because there are many people who have, but it's still not necessarily a position where people are starting from an equitable place. Like they're not, right? They're starting from different positions. And then I think sometimes people can ignore that and just expect people to be at the same place when, we have this history of, segregation. We have this history of slavery, and it still lingers. And it didn't just end with slavery, right? Because there was a backlash after slavery, right? They didn't give Black people full rights during Reconstruction. That was interrupted, right? And then we have Jim Crow. We have Jim Crow going into the 50s. We have Brown versus Board of Education, people protesting against Brown versus Board of Education going into the 60s, right? And then we have a war on drugs, which, there's historical evidence that shows the war on drugs was intended to suppress Black people obtaining their full civil rights, right? When people started making demands for socioeconomic rights, like we want, access to property and to these other rights in addition to our civil rights, then you have, the war on drugs. We have like the targeting of Black people and pushing them into the criminal system. So all these things that have happened, and, that's part of what Michelle Alexander discusses in the new Jim Crow. Like there's all these ways that there have been these systemic and structural barriers placed on Black people. And so, if you look at why are there these disparities, well, they're intentional. Like a lot of them are intentional. Even when you think about like the ways that when Black communities were thriving, right? Then you have like Tulsa riots, right? You have like, white supremacists entering those communities and disrupting the economic power that those communities are, developing, right? And then you even have, the federal government interfering with like redlining, where the federal government is saying, okay, this is a Black community. We're going to value these properties as less than, right? And so there's all these barriers, these structural barriers, and we haven't actually addressed them. Like we haven't actually said, okay, federal government, state governments, you created these inequities. Like when Black people were really trying to like build their own economic power, build their own family foundations, we disrupted them intentionally, right? Because we didn't want that. And then we walked away and didn't provide resources to rebuild.
Thank you for listening to the Success Journey Show. Please follow us on our social media on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at The Success Journey Show. Also, check out our website at thesuccessjourneyshow.com. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the show.
And, you bring up so many points that tug deep at our hearts in the different things that we're involved in, different conversations that we're in, and the initiatives that we're a part of. And, you see all these things and you start looking for the solution, right? You start looking for, hey, how can I help? And it's so deep rooted. Sometimes you can get discouraged, right? Sometimes you get discouraged because I can't go tomorrow and fix 3 generations of problems. It's going to take time and effort and attention and resources in order to fix it. How do you encourage people to help on that rebound or that rebuild of those communities, as you were addressing, so that they can move from that survival mode, which many are in now, to that thriving mode, which many of them want to be?
Yeah, I think, the only way you can really do it is with patience, love, compassion,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, it can feel discouraging, but when you think about it this way, that like the goal is really to like maybe eliminate people or just completely push people out, and people are still alive, they're still thriving, like they survived. Even that's an achievement, right? Like, okay, well, we're still here. We're still resilient. Like we have a beautiful culture. We still are here, right? You're not going to get rid of us, right? So even that can be celebrated. And, to know that like with persistence, with the right resources, that we can in fact get to that place of thriving if we continue to keep pushing for it, right? And we had to be persistent. Like we had to keep pushing for it because, to be honest, the opposition, the people who don't want to see Black people thriving, they're persistent too, right? They're still actively working, trying to undermine. And so that's why we had to just keep going.
What do you say to, because Ricky and I get this all the time. When somebody says, well, India, you made it out. Why couldn't everybody else do the same thing you did? Why couldn't, you understand what I'm saying? Ricky and I get this every time we speak to people or people of other backgrounds. They always they always say, well, you two did something positive and different with your life. What happened to, why can't everybody else do that? How do you answer those questions?
Right. Well, both of you are extraordinary, right? Everyone shouldn't have to be extraordinary to be able to get out, right? Like what we're trying to build is a fairer and just society where everyone could do okay and do well. The fact that you were able to overcome these, barriers, all the stereotypes that there are Black men, does not make it a feat that's easy to do. It just means that you were extraordinary and you did more than the majority of people would be able to do. But you still need to look back for everyone else and, really find a way where we can make it so it's really equitable, right? And that's what we're really focused on doing, building a more equitable society. The fact that you have examples of a few extraordinary individuals doesn't remove the fact that we have these, systemic barriers that impact most people, right? And the fact that someone isn't able to overcome a systemic barrier isn't necessarily like a referendum on them as an individual, right? Your success is really just a referendum on you and how extraordinary you were able to do. And, that doesn't mean anything about everyone else.
Yeah. I'm going to shift it just a tad bit, because you went and pursued your JD, right? Which everyone that practices law doesn't pursue their JD, right? I would like to know a little bit more about what kind of pushed you in that direction to make that decision to pursue that. And then also, where did your desire for teaching that next generation really, where was that birthed from? And how have you been able to thrive in that area as well? Because being a lawyer is one thing, teaching is another layer added on top of that, right? For the next generation. So talk to us about those two things there.
Sure. So I got my JD from Fordham. I also did my Ph.D. and decided to do the graduate study because I was interested in law, but the ways that it operated in society, some of the policy questions, the whys about different things. And I wanted the opportunity to kind of study deeply, do research and do writing to really think about not just the ways that the laws are practiced in a courtroom, but the ways that it should be practiced. Like, what should we be striving for? How should the laws change? Like, what's wrong with the ways that courts are interpreting the law? And, how are people experiencing it in like actual everyday life? Right. And I wanted to kind of focus on those questions. And, even when I was practicing, those are some of the things I was thinking about, like the why. Right. And so, teaching gives me an opportunity to explore these questions with my students and then also explore them in my research, just to spend time, really reading and doing research and writing about what I think the law should be doing, what I'm seeing in society that, might be problematic. So for example, after, the initial movement for Black lives, and when people were saying Black Lives Matter around like 2016 or so, then there was a movement in response to that, like Blue Lives Matter. People started saying all lives matter, like in response to people saying Black Lives Matter. And then I took time to write about that, right? And I said, in fact, the fact that you respond to Black Lives Matter with Blue Lives Matter, you're trying to condition that statement, right? Because that's a response, right? It's not just coming out of nowhere. You're saying that you can't just say Black Lives Matter by itself, unconditioned. Like, you need to add a qualifier. Like, you need to say, yeah, Black Lives Matter, but Blue Lives Matter, right? And why is that? Like, why do people have that response? Like, why do you feel like Black lives need to be conditioned in a way? And so, being a professor allows me to spend time to kind of do that type of research and ask those questions and analyze, like, what's happening in society? Like, why are people responding in this way? And, it can give people pause. Sometimes, I hear that like some of the stuff I've written helps people who are doing, advocacy. Sometimes it helps people when they're writing briefs for court, and, kind of support movements in that other type of way.
Yeah. It's crazy. So a couple of things. First I saw a comedian. he said, can you believe that the phrase Black Lives Matter triggered people? He said, what's less than matter? Could we have put something less than matter to not have triggered somebody? What? And then he said, when people are like, you go to somebody and be like, hey, listen, man, I think everyone should have equality. And somebody's like, no, I don't think it should. Like, how does society operate? And somebody says, hey, we want everyone to have equality. And somebody says, no, I don't think everybody should have equality. And it's crazy in society that that's just a norm and people move like that and they don't think like that. That's problematic. Now, my second thing, and I want to do this because you're a lawyer, this is how I was thinking. In the Zimmerman case against Trayvon, right? The death of Trayvon. I'm thinking that he calls the police. Zimmerman calls the police. I'm not, I'm just running through this because I want
to talk to a lawyer. He does it to his sister too. She's a lawyer too.
Yeah, my sister's a lawyer. Right? So he calls the police, and the police says, "Don't advance. Leave it alone." He does it anyway, but he says he's standing his ground when he advanced he went to question the young man. And that goes to court, through court, because when you said the policy of learning what should be happening in courts versus what is happening, that triggered my mind. Like, how did you see that as a lawyer, as even a person? You're just like, how does that fly through court?
White supremacy, like, that's the only answer I can give you, because like, honestly, I you don't know what was motivating individual jurors, but the only way you can really understand the outcome in that case is that, people, the jurors who were making the determination here sympathize more with him than they could with Trayvon Martin. And so, going to your question about like, how could a simple statement like Black Lives Matter, like it's not saying Black lives are just so great. Black lives should get more. It's just matter. But some people do not think that Black lives matter, that in fact, I am fearful of, Black men or Black boys, Black people. And, I relate more with this other person who thinks that he needs to protect his streets from the threat of Black people, right? And so it's kind of going to that myth of Black criminality, right? So this is outside the law, right? Because the law says, hey, there's a lot that, George Zimmerman did here that he shouldn't have done. And, it doesn't seem like he was threatened at all. And when you listen to the audio, it's pretty clear that he wasn't, that he was the aggressor here. So any reasonable interpretation would be like, no, he doesn't get any self-defense, that he doesn't get protected under law. That's what a reasonable interpretation was. So there's something else happening here. And I think what was happening is that, that myth of Black criminality, that you should always be threatened by Black people, and then you're in your home, that you need to guard your neighborhood against them. I can only imagine that, some of those jurors related more to that, right? And so that idea of Black lives mattering didn't matter to them, right? They feel like, well, my community matters more and Black people are a threat to me. And unfortunately, that is, that was for, I think, maybe still continues to be a view of a lot of people in this country. I think, what was interesting, what really disrupted people's perceptions was, the George Floyd case, at least for a little bit of time, right? I don't know if you can relate to this, or you had this experience where it seemed like Black people already knew, like stuff like George Floyd case occurred. You mentioned Abda Diallo case, but like it's like for some white people, like only when they saw the video, saw the evidence, it's like, oh, maybe Black people aren't making this stuff up. Like maybe there's something to this. Like maybe there is some, discrimination in this country, right? And people were like kind of, shook. They were, became awake all of a sudden to things that, we already knew, like that we already saw, that we already experienced. There were no people who experienced. And so, you look at the Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman case. How did you get that outcome? Well, I don't think it's the law that people were following when they arrived at that outcome, to be honest.
Man.
Yeah.
Tell you,
go Rick.
No, I tell you, just here, just knowing the society that we live in, and then raising. I always look at my boys. I have 3 boys, and you look at pictures when they're little babies, and they are, adored. Like, oh wow, it's a good thing. And then as they start getting bigger, you start seeing the people, primarily people of different race. They start looking at them differently, right? And they start getting bigger. And now it's not just one Black boy running outside; it's 3. So when then that's now you take 3 outside, you're like, oh boy, something. It raises a red flag in a lot of people's minds. Why? Because that's what media has conditioned people to do. And so I'm always aware of that. And it also makes me reflect back to, my parents. My parents, my mother was on the bus when they were desegregating the schools. She was on the first bus to go transfer across one area of Charlotte, North Carolina, over to the other as they, desegregated. And, we grew up in a predominantly white community, and there were, 5 kids, 5, 6 kids. And, it's that same issue of, I was always wondering why my dad was like, hey, nah, man, I don't want you wearing that when we're going to places. I want you to make sure you're tidied up here. I want to make sure you're not giving any false impression of something that you're not, or something that would raise even more of a red flag, by the way you talk, by the way that you dress, by the way that you're doing different things. And I didn't really understand it fully when I was his age, but now I'm on the other side of it, and I see my boys. I'm like, the society that we live in is like, I don't want to raise them in that fear. But at the same time, I have that awareness now. And I'm just like, man, how do I make sure that they aren't seen even more as a target than they already are based off of the society? And the issues that you're bringing up, and just I really respect the space that you're in, because you're talking about these things every single day. You're bringing a light to this space, and you're sharing thoughts. You're causing people to think and stretching their minds around these topics, which is great, and what we really need in our society and in our world. So I just want to say thank you for just the work that you're doing. And I know you say you're on your journey, and every person that has attained some success that we brought on this show says the same exact phrase that you said. So you're in great company, and that's what we expect from people that are going after great things in life, right? They figure, hey, we're still climbing. Like I don't feel, and this goes to, and we're this is not a Christian base or faith-based podcast, but a lot of things Marlon and I's core is in that, into our core. And, one thing is just like, make sure that you plant in the right seeds, right? Planting the right seeds. And as you plant those right seeds and you water those right seeds, get into the right environments, those things will flourish, those things will grow. And that's what we're trying to do right here in this world. Start planting seeds. Don't know how long it's going to take, right? But they will grow. So, man, thank you. I want to give you an opportunity to share with our guests and travelers around the world, like anything that you're working on, Marlon. I see your face. You have something else to say?
There's a topic here, and I know you're going to go into, and I don't know if you have any more time into the topic here, Ricky, that it says, and I really want to hear this from her perspective, why she thinks sex work should be decriminalized.
Ooh. That's a great question, and I have a response for Ricky too. So, thing that I will leave your travelers with is that I actually have a book that recently came out called "Policing Bodies." It's about the policing of sex work in Johannesburg, South Africa. And there I spent 2 years with police and sex workers. And in the book, I really analyzed what I found during the course of that time. But, going to your question, Marlon, I think sex work should be decriminalized, because what I found was that criminalization of sex work actually led to more violence. It put sex workers in a more dangerous kind of situation because they weren't able to ask for any assistance, and they were being targeted when you start to criminalize them. So they're not able to properly screen clients. It didn't eliminate sex work. It just ended up making it more dangerous. And so, what I've kind of been thinking about lately are the ways that we use policing and the criminal law in ways that actually will result in more harms and more danger for, marginalized populations and marginalized groups. And so, I think sex work should be decriminalized because it just leads to more violence. And, if we're really concerned with, sex workers, I think we can speak to them to find out what they need and how they can be best supported.
Wow. Man,
yeah, we could, that would be that. We could open a can of worms.
Yeah.
It's a very intriguing and thought-provoking topic that can, if you sit, you can argue on both sides of the fence. So but I wanted people out there to kind of get the essence of some of the stuff that you're working on. Ricky, before Ricky, now I'm going to ask you this, and I hope it's not going to be offensive. When you think of a lawyer, people typically have a certain a vision of what it should be. This person that walks into this thing with a suit and da-da-da-da. How do people accept you? We see you right here. If you're watching this, if you're listening to it, please go to Facebook. You have pink hair and you have a pink glasses. How do people accept you with that? I know society now is changing a little bit because I work at the Pentagon, and I see a lot more people that get to express themselves how they want in a professional environment, with the hair, with the earrings, with all the different, with the tattoos. So it's being more acceptive. But sometimes in a professional setting like lawyers, it's very, people see you walk into a room and they're like, oh, the lawyer over there. And they're like, because they have a perception of what a lawyer should look like. How is that? How are you accepted, and what kind of questions do you get because of you being expressing yourself?
Yeah, I would say from lawyers and professors, I've actually gotten a really great reception. So I started at the beginning of the pandemic. There's actually a bit of a story behind it. So I have pink hair. And I got pink hair because I actually just wanted to jazz things up. I was bored with it was the beginning of the pandemic, but also, it was interesting. Like, I have a young girl, so I have 3 kids, and my youngest is, I have twins who are 3 years old, and one of them is a girl, one's a boy. And then I noticed that, like, I never wore pink. I never used to wear that color. And I asked myself, I was like, why don't I wear pink? And I realized, I used to think it was too feminine. And I was like, well, what's the problem with that? And my girl, she really liked pink. And I would use all these gender neutral stuff. And I was like, why can't pink be gender neutral? Like, why am I like not wearing pink? And why can't I just embrace it? And so I started embracing it. And, I said to myself, I'm going to wear more pink. Like, I'm just going to do it. And I've done it. And, now it's just, I feel like it means a lot for like my students just to see, that you could be really awesome as a lawyer, as a professor, and, still be able to be an individual and be creative and, not necessarily conform in particular ways. And, I felt comfortable doing it because, I just felt like, I've done a lot of things people say that you need to do in this position. Like, I got the right articles, right, whatever. And so, I'm a boss, I'm working back my pink hair and I'll be all right, And so that's what I've been doing. I've been having fun with it, and I think people get a kick out of it.
Yeah, definitely.
I love it. See the boss thing came out towards the end. I was trying to pull that out at the beginning. She's on her stuff, like she ain't slacking here. Came out on the end. I should have said, I'm wearing the pink hair. You should know that already. Like, no, I love it. Man, this has been a great conversation, India. Like I said, we just thank you for everything that you're doing in this space. Man, people like yourself, man, this is what it takes for us to change that trajectory. I hope that every student that sees you, that sees that example, strives to make a difference even more so in this space and beyond. And really want to thank you for stopping by here at the Success Journey Show to share your story. Before we leave, there's one question that we ask all of our guests, and that question is we take it back, to a time in your life. And sometimes we pick something based off of the stories that you share, but I'm going to have you kind of like just reveal it to us. And the pose a question as, hey, you get an opportunity to talk to your younger self years ago, whether it's going to high school or in your college days or early career, whatever it may be, whatever point is significant to you. And you get 1 minute to talk to yourself, knowing what you know now, who you are now, the experiences you have now. You get 1 minute to go back and talk to your older, younger self. What would you say? What is that time period, and what would you say to her?
I think I would go to myself in high school, and I would just say, "You're doing a good job, girl. You're doing a good job." You don't have to doubt yourself. You don't have to question yourself. Just keep it up.
Love it. Definitely. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. Travelers, thank you for joining us today.
If they want to reach her.
Yep. If they want to reach you, where can they reach you at?
They can find me on Twitter. And so my Twitter handle is at INGERRI. So INGERRI, injury. You can find me there.
I'm a bad speller. I thought I was spelling something else. But
well, I spelled it. I use my own funny little spelling for it. So.
Okay. Yeah, no, you guys, travelers. Hey, travelers, we're out of here. We love you. Thank you for tuning in. Tune in next week at the same time, same place on the Success Journey Show. Everyone have a good one. Peace.
All right. One love.
You've been listening to the Success Journey Show, where your dreams, drive, determination, and diligence are the foundation to success. For more information, check out thesuccessjourneyshow.com. The Journey Squad is here helping you to your destination.